Okay, today we are going to look at conditional statements and examples of how to write them. So a conditional statement is a statement that can be written in if, then form. So in symbols, P, an arrow, and then Q. So it's read as if P, then Q. Or you could say P implies Q. Okay? And P and Q can be any statement that you could come up with. So the hypothesis is the phrase immediately following the word if. So your parents may say, if you take out the garbage. Okay? And then the conditional is what will happen if you do take out that garbage. So the conclusion is the phrase immediately following the word then. Then you can go out with your friends. So we're going to do an example of how to identify hypothesis and conclusion. So with a highlighter, I'm going to look at the first conditional. If you live in Nashville, then you live in Tennessee. So I'm looking for the word if. That'll give me my hypothesis. And the conclusion, I'm looking for the word then. You live in Tennessee. So if you write that out, the hypothesis is you live in Nashville. And the conclusion would be you live in Tennessee. So some live. And if you said I live in Nashville, they might think, oh, they live in Tennessee. Okay. Second example, geometry type example. Hypothesis, again, we look for the word if. So the sum of the measures of two angles is 90 degrees. Okay. The conclusion is, then what do we know? We do know that complementary angles have a sum of 90 degrees, so that is our conclusion. So if someone says I have two angles and they add to 90 degrees, you can say, oh, then they are complementary. So now you take a minute with your highlighter and look at number 3 and highlight the hypothesis and conclusion and write your answer down. So hopefully you highlighted quadrilateral is a square as the hypothesis, and the conclusion is then it has 4 right angles. So identifying the hypothesis and conclusion is very important, because if you don't have a conditional statement written in if-then form, sometimes you need to write that yourself so that it will make sense. So for number 4, we have a statement. An obtuse angle has a measure greater than 90 degrees. So you would think, what would come first? What would be my hypothesis? Well, it might be obtuse angle. So the obtuse angle would be your hypothesis. The conclusion would be, well, then, what do you know about an obtuse angle? We know it has a measure greater than 90 degrees. So you also want to make sure when you write an if-then statement that it makes sense grammatically. So if your English teacher was looking at it, would this make sense? So we can say, if an angle is obtuse. So we word it so that it makes sense. Then it has a measure greater than 90. try another one. All numbers divisible by 4 are also divisible by 2. So we'd start with, we have number by 4, that would be our hypothesis, and our conclusion is then they are also divisible by 2. So you can say if a number, so instead of using all, we'll just say if a number is divisible by 4, then it is divisible by 2. And let's try one more together. So states on the East Coast border the Atlantic Ocean. So what's the first thing we're talking about? If a state is on the East Coast, then what do we think we know about it? Well, we think then it will border the Atlantic Ocean. Makes sense. Coast is on the ocean. So if a state, so we can change from plural to singular. If a state is on the East Coast, then it borders the Atlantic Ocean. So with those 3 examples in mind, you take a moment to try number 7 and 8. So as you can see in these 2 answers, we again reworded it a little bit just so that it makes sense. So if it is Valentine's Day, then it is February. And then for number 8, again we go from plural to singular to make it make sense. So if a number is prime, then it only has 2 factors, 1 and itself. So that is how you write a conditional statement and identify hypothesis and conclusion.